I was thinking today about when the last time I played a game that scared me or gave me a fright, and it actually took me a while to think of something because, yeah, I mean, when was the last time a game truly scared you? I think, like, it feels like games have lost their teeth a little bit recently. Um, I don't know. It just feels like a lot of the games out there, they just kind of rely on what's on the surface. Like what you see is what you get. You're struck with big, kind of huge amounts of gore or, shadow monsters jumping out at you. I guess a lot of it got inspired by probably Insidious, because if you don't know the movie Insidious and that director, I think James Wan kicked off like a real huge chain of horror movies that I think have been really influential to video games, in really getting into not just the dark shadow monster kind of popping out at you, which is kind of the typical thing in those movies. And there's a really funny freeze frame from I think it might be Insidious 2 of a shadow monster. I probably will have to throw it in this video. But those movies really influence games a lot, I think, to where it's sort of taking everything out and putting it on the surface so it can really jump out at you and surprise you, and that's great. That is definitely, I think we can't say that is not scary, but I think it's only one part of things being scared, like surprise and jump scares and all that kind of stuff. I used to really devalue it and say that it was just like, yeah, they're just surprising me, jumping out and going, bleh. It felt a bit cheap at the time, but I think it's only if it's like reduced down to just being that. And that's just like fear in general, right? Fear is something that you're thinking about in the moment, something coming out, like the guy with the chainsaw, like bursting through the wall at you, like that is fear. That gives you a huge jolt of adrenaline. That can be quite scary, right? But once you've seen him burst through the wall at you once, twice, three times, you're kind of ready for him. You've already got the shotgun out and you're laying into him. You're blowing his bloody head off as he comes out at you already. And so I think that fear alone, it's kind of an unstable balance of a game being scary. And as it's been really explored, like trying to do so many different topics that are all on the surface, masked killers, big monsters, shadow people kind of jumping out at you and chasing you, whether you have a gun or not. I think that we start to predict it and we start to think, okay, it's going to be the shadow monster that comes out at me again. And so the fear kind of loses its power as it, presents itself, I guess. And so I think what I thought about is that I think that games that are scary, there's a whole picture there of you need something to jump out at you. You need something to jump out at you with a chainsaw, but also you need the context of everything, of what's going on, to be scary. You need that kind of feeling of dread or terror of, the premise or the story of, or not just the story, but like what's actually going on in the game needs to scare you to the point where you don't want to go forward because you don't want to find out what's going on. And that's kind of the key there. It's like, I guess I'll touch on it a bit later, but I think writing something to induce that terror is hard, because as soon as you show your cards, it's kind of like, well, now the concept really has to be super scary to be able to keep giving you that feeling of terror. Like, I think a particular game that did this well of like balancing, showing you enough while still, even when it's shown you what's going on, still being scary, has to be Silent Hill 2. I think particularly the remake is quite interesting because, as games have sort of become less and less risky as we go on, making a scary game is a bit of a risk, because you're immediately ruling out a huge chunk of your audience. And even people who like scary games are so picky. Like, horror fans are so picky, whether you like horror movies or horror games. And I think that like Silent Hill 2 got a big budget, but Bloober Team have a big back catalog of horror games as well. But it was sort of like it's such a strong brand, like coming back with the biggest hitter of one of the biggest hitter of all times for horror games. It's just so famous up until now. And I guess there's a couple of things that worked for it. Is that I think that it's introspective, like it's constantly making you try to think about the game. It's trying to make you look into it and look under the surface, not relying what's on the surface. Yes, there's Pyramid Head, he has a big sword, he's going to chase you, right? But thinking about why you're there, and like it's not just like shadows and darkness and monsters. There's a whole bunch of meaning and kind of just plain messed up stuff that's going on in the context of that game and that story. And I think since you have to think about that so much as you're playing it, like what the hell is going on with James? Why does he sound like he's on drugs? Who are these people that have come here, and why do they behave so erratically? And like as you start to explore their dark past, it's kind of like you just get struck with this feeling of I'm no longer playing a game. It's like I'm thinking about these characters in this world so much that you're just completely immersed at that point. And I think that's where a lot of the horror games kind of trip up, is that as soon as they start doing some of those gameplay, right, of like coming up and jumping out at you, you get taken out of it. You immediately get taken out of it. You're not thinking about like the whole point of the game and why that's sort of raising up the hair on the back of your neck. It's just a game at that point. And you're kind of running away in the haunted house, and yeah, that's fun, right? But there's only so many times you can do that before you're just like, okay, I need something a bit more substantial. I want the main course now. Yeah, I guess like some of the hard topics in Silent Hill 2, like going into it, I mean, you could make a whole video about it, right? People have like dissected that game in and out 100 times. It just goes so deep, but overall it just kind of makes your skin crawl a little bit. And so I think that game particularly, it really balances fear and the secret ingredient there, which is terror, together. I think you can't really have just one or the other. You need both of them to have a well-rounded game. If you just rely on fear, like things jumping out at you, we'll just reduce it to its basic thing. I think that it's like fast and like fast food, right? You get in there, it's like a 30-minute 1 hour game. You can really get by on just jumping out at you. And there's a couple of good indie games that do that. I will have to put it in the description. But if you want to kind of keep someone's attention and keep them going without just constantly having them needed to be jumped out at by things, I think you really need to introduce terror. I think the game that I played last that truly scared me and that I actually am reluctant to go back and play most recently, I mean, it came out a while ago, but it would have to be Visage. And I think a lot of people have mentioned this game before in a similar light, is that this is actually quite a scary game. And on the surface, right, if you just look at it as a game by itself, it seems to be doing quite a predictable formula where you have kind of that, I guess, Amnesia kind of popularized it, where it's quote unquote, you're just walking around, sort of interacting with things and solving puzzles in a house, or PT style, I guess, because Visage really kind of came out at that perfect point where it's bouncing off the hype of PT. But what's interesting about Visage that I think really elevates it and puts it into that nice balance between fear and fear and terror, is that it deals with the unseen a lot and the unknown. So the unseen is like in Visage, the game kind of fucks with you. It fucks with you a lot. I will say this. Constantly you're going around, and even just right at the beginning, it's quite subtle, but it tells you, right? It tells you straight to the face, you as the player, it's just like going into the dark is bad. bad things will happen if you go into the dark. You may die. And you're like, okay, I can deal with this. This is fine. You know, we're in a house. We got lights. We'll go around and we'll turn the lights on. And a lot of games do this in a little bit of a, I guess it feels a little bit scripted, you know, when you go into the room and then the little doll falls off the shelf and then the toy starts up in the corner and the window slams shut and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, as you inch forward, you hit the next one and it kind of takes you out of it, right? Because it's like, oh, I can't move 2 centimeters without something falling off the shelves. But in Visage, you have that little hub world of the, like the center staircase that goes up to the second floor and the living rooms that are all connected, and it tells you can go off on different paths and storyline from that hub, which I think it's just an excellent idea for making a horror game. I think more games should use that. And as you kind of start to explore, you go into the bathroom, and it happens a lot, right? The light will just turn off at some point, and the first time it happens, you're like, oh, you know, that's fine. It's just the game is messing with me. And then after a while, it starts to kind of slowly get darker and darker, and some of the light bulbs stop working, and then you get like a candle or something, and you can light one of the candles, but then something will happen and your candle will go out, and you have like 2 of them. You only have 2 candles. You're like, that was my second to last one. Please stop. And it just kind of keeps doing it in such a nice rhythm, in such a nice way, that it's not just the unseen, this kind of entity that's not about the ghost. It's not about the story of the family that lived in there. It's kind of the game that's talking to your mind, doing this to you. It really got to me, and it started to kind of freak me out. Not in like a triggered way, but I have to put the controller down. Like, this is too much. The other thing is, Visage deals a lot with, I would say, the unknown. So just as a game, it's very creative, and it tries to go against your expectations about what's going to happen. Like, what do you have to do in the next, we'll just call it the next level, because it kind of has those different branching storylines. Going back to what I said before, is that like, once you know what's going to happen, once you know that when you go in there, something's going to chase you, or, you know, you have to find the key or something like that before the shadow creeps in and you die. Once you know that's going to happen, it loses all its teeth, and it's just like, well, I'm just, you know, solving the puzzle to get out. But Visage constantly tries to do different kinds of mechanics, and just gameplay. You have to do lots of different things as you go to each stage, and they're still quite simple, but it tries to put a twist on everything and tries to find a new way to mess with you or introduce like a new antagonist or like a ghost or something that is going to behave differently to the last one. It's not just, you know, like a different looking or a bit slower or a bit faster, or, you know, this is the big guy that like comes at you slowly. It's like, it's going to do something different to you, or like make you play differently. Like, one I remember that was really messed up, that I actually had to put the controller down, was there was this, it was like a ghost or something like that. And it was a bit of a classic one, but it would walk behind you. Like, you would get the footsteps of something walking behind you as you would start walking, and then as you would stop, you'd turn around, it's not there. And it was just done in such a it sounds stereotypical, but trust me, when you play it and you face some of these interesting kinds of spooky ghosts, I think you will enjoy it if you like just games trying to get under your skin. So I guess, like, to wrap it up, I mean, do you know any games like that are, I guess, conceptually introduce that they're just terrifying, they just freak you out just thinking about the idea behind the game? Like, what is the purpose of you being in there, or the story? Like, what got to you in the end that made you go, oh, okay, this is kind of messed up, I don't know if I can keep going. But also, on the other hand, I'm sure there's games out there that rely only on fear and just trying to scare and jump out at you and give you that huge jolt of adrenaline. what games out there are pulling it off? I mean, that could be kind of interesting to explore. But yeah, let me know. Or yeah, sub if you like this or want to see more. Bye bye.